Now, the big declines we're seeing in the Asian markets today follow very similar moves on Wall Street overnight. The Dow, in fact, down by more than 5% as we saw a lot of profit-taking in the markets, but also concerns about, what this new administration is going to mean for the equity markets and for the economy in the U.S. The Nasdaq closed down 5.5%, and the S&P 500 down just over 5% as well. The drop marked Wall Street's biggest loss ever on the day after a presidential election, and it also comes on the heels of the biggest election day rally on record in the previous session. Anticipation of an Obama victory had been giving markets a boost, but a fresh batch of economic data overnight underscored the massive challenges awaiting his administration. The Institute of Supply Management Services Index came in at 44.4 in October, down from 50.2 the month before. The results were way below the key boom or bust level of 50. And there was a bleak picture on the jobs front as well. The monthly ADP report, this is a private sector employment report showing that U.S. private employers cut a larger than expected 157,000 jobs in October. The attention now shifts to the October jobs report that is coming out on Friday, and economists polled by Reuters expect that data to show another 200,000 jobs were lost last month. Well, those are just some of the issues facing President-elect Barack Obama, and here to discuss the challenges ahead, we've got Patrick Basham. He's adjunct scholar at the Cato Institute. He joins us from Washington, D.C. With us from Tokyo is Alex Bridoux, analyst at the Eurasia Group. And Patrick, let me start off with you. First and foremost, tell me, what are the top 2 or 3 things President-elect Obama is going to have to do right now?
Well, he has to show leadership in terms of the financial crisis, and secondly, more broadly, show leadership in terms of economic policy, in terms of what is his plan to get the economy going again. About 2/3 of American states are in recession. The expectation is now that the country as a whole will be technically in a recession by the next quarter. So what's his plan to dig the country, perhaps literally, out of that?
And Alex, let me ask you a question. He has already announced some of his transition team, Alex. Do you think then what are the first 2 or 3 key positions that President-elect Obama is going to want to name quickly?
Well, I think he's probably going to move relatively quickly on some of the national security and foreign policy areas, because those, along with the economy, are still critical issues. When the economic team gets named, I think is still a bit open to question. I think it depends in part on how the Bush administration and the Obama team view the G20 summit that's coming up on the 15th of November and how they might want to coordinate policy. There might be some risks attached with announcing a new Treasury Secretary just ahead of that meeting if it diminishes President Bush's ability to get things done during that conference. So I think we should look to the economic and foreign policy areas as being the most critical, and I think there's going to be a lot of expectation that Obama will name those positions fairly quickly.
Patrick, to what extent does Mr. Obama have to manage expectations? I mean, he ran on a platform of hope and change for the U.S. economy and the U.S. System, I should say. But now that he's being faced with these daunting tasks, how much will he have to manage expectations and sort of tell the public that things will not occur quickly?
Oh, he's going to have to manage expectations very, very carefully. As you say, most people who voted for him aren't especially familiar with his plans, and he is something of a blank slate in policy terms. And so he comes into the presidency with this expectation that he is going to bring about change, but change that's largely undefined, or at least undefined in the public's mind's eye. And so when he starts to make choices, makes decisions, he has to pick from various options. He's going to disappoint people. He's going to upset people. And that is when we're going to see the type of president he is in terms of his leadership and communication skills, and also whether his support is actually quite deep or whether it's quite thin. And we'll get a better sense then when he starts to get into a little bit of heavy weather politically, whether he is someone who has been brought in basically simply largely because he's not George W. Bush, or whether he's someone who actually captured something in the public's imagination about himself, and that he can use that to maintain political capital going forward.
And Patrick, let me just follow up really quickly with you here. To what extent do you expect that his new cabinet will have familiar faces?
I think it will have some familiar faces. Some from the Clinton administration. Many of his hundreds of advisors are Clinton administration veterans. I think also look out for a couple of Republicans, a couple of the more moderate Republican senators, past and present, will probably get offered spots. And then there are people such as, for example, as Senator John Kerry, the presidential candidate in 2004 for the Democrats, who's lobbying very heavily in Washington today. He would like to be the next Secretary of State.
Alex, is there a danger that as President-elect Obama moves towards naming his new cabinet, putting his economic and foreign policy teams together, that this will undermine what President Bush is currently trying to do in terms of finding a global comprehensive approach or multilateral approach to dealing with this financial crisis we're facing?
I think that's true, but I think to a certain degree it's unavoidable when you have a transition of a president who will be leaving office in 2.5 months. It can be difficult for President Bush to try and get global leaders to come to many conclusions. I think that the G20 summit probably is going to be more of a starting point than an end point for a lot of these global financial discussions, and I think in part that's because world leaders will be looking to the next administration who they're going to have to deal with, who's going to have to implement the policies that are discussed by global leaders at these various conferences. Now, I think that the Obama transition team will work with the Bush administration. The extent to which they are able to coordinate policy and cooperate, I think, remains an open question. But I think that for both parties, there is an incentive to see a relatively smooth transition over the next couple of months, and one that tries to minimize the kinds of tensions or frictions that could lead to problems for President Bush as he moves forward. But I think it's going to be difficult in general for President Bush to move much forward in terms of new policy directions over the next couple of months, simply by virtue of the position that he's in as a lame duck president.
Yeah, but Alex, there have also been indications. Yeah, sorry, Patrick, go ahead.
Can you just add something on that? I think that the members of the G20, minus the United States, have really caught a break here with Obama's election, because basically the push from President Sarkozy of France and others is for more regulation. You know, they want to ban offshore tax havens, this kind of thing, limit the types of risks that can be taken by traders. Those are all things which philosophically President Bush is opposed to. We don't know whether he would cave in or not. But President-elect Obama is not philosophically opposed to any of that. So there could be a lot more progress made, in inverted commas, with the new president than with the outgoing president.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. We do appreciate it. Patrick Basham, adjunct scholar at the Cato Institute, and Alex Brideau, analyst at Eurasia Group, joining us there from Tokyo and Washington, D.C.